Okay, guys, I'm going to call out the inconsistencies in our society, particularly when it comes to minor status. You're a minor depending on who you attack and what your crime is. So here's, for example, a young lady, which I did a video on. She's only 15. She's a predator. She went online to search for a sugar daddy to rinse. She'll be considered a minor, and the man will be placed behind bars if he had anything to do with her. In the meantime, here's a teenage girl who's only 14. She's a year younger. And yet she was tried as adult when she committed murder. Do you see the inconsistency? Here, Grande, he'll even mention it. Dr. Todd Grande mentions this.
Carly was found a half-mile away and taken into custody. Carly Gregg was charged as an adult with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and tampering with physical evidence. The state offered Carly a very good plea deal if she pleaded guilty to.
See, she was charged as an adult. Why? Is she not 14 years old? I mean, no matter what her crime was, she's going to remain 14. So either you're too young to know what you're doing or you're not, right? And this is what I'm talking about. So if you're a teenage girl and your victim is a man, then you're considered a child. But what'd she do? She killed her mom. And if you killed your mother, if you take out one of the nobility, now you're an adult. Now you can be considered a fully brained person who's fully conscious of what they've done. We'll play a little bit of the Inside Edition. Let's hear this.
Deceiving. This 14-year-old with bushy bangs is a cold-blooded killer. She fatally shot her mother in the face and tried to kill her stepfather. As Jim Murray reports, it took the jury no time at all to decide this case.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder.
A baby-faced teenager hears a jury's damning verdict. A home surveillance camera caught the moment 15-year-old Carly Gregg shot her mother to death in their home. She creeps through the house.
There you go. By the way, this young lady, I agree with the jury, right? I agree that this 14-year-old girl knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't crazy. She didn't have a psychotic episode. She simply didn't have her way. She's a psychopath, and she murdered her mother and tried to murder her stepdad. I agree. So I'm glad this dangerous person was put away. I don't care if she's 14. Yet society does consider it important. You know, if you're a 15-year-old girl and you're out rinsing a man, now all of a sudden they can't consent. Their brains just don't function well enough to give consent, right? So when it comes to consenting for sex, 15-year-old is too young. But when it comes to committing a murder, then all of a sudden 14-year-old is an adult. Do you see my issue with this? Because all depends on who gets attacked, right? Now, I want to point something else. I talked about the age of consent. Japan was ridiculously low. It was 13. I mean, you're still a kid at 13. They didn't up it to 16 until 23. So last year. It used to be 13 years old. Now, why was it only 13? People try to argue that this is patriarchy and it's to benefit the men. That's a lie. That's a lie. There's never been a time when any society did something to benefit men. I'll tell you why. Japanese woman dies from overwork. They're talking about a couple cases where women overworked in Japan. It's something that happens to men all the time, but they're concerned when it happens to women, right? I said, do Japanese housewives have to work? They do not necessarily have to work in the classical sense. In other words, they don't. They're leeching off their husbands. So When they had it at 13, the whole point was they wanted to give their daughters an out from corrosive, right? They didn't want their daughters to work to death. So they would say, hey, become a housewife. And what they did is said, we'll let these 13-year-old girls, 13 and 14, bang grown men. Those grown men will become attached and say, I'll wife this girl, and she won't ever have to work for a living, and she won't die from corrosion. You've got to understand the motivations of society. There's never, ever, ever been a time which any society did anything for men just because they're men. Even the voting rights, right? When the common man got the voting rights, he had to sign up for conscription. When women did it, they didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to sacrifice anything. Right? So it's always like, it's not a privilege, it's always a compensation to encourage men to keep sacrificing themselves. At best, it's a minor compensation. There's never a time where society does anything for men. So that's what this age of consent is. And so if a little girl kills mommy, she's an adult and she's going away forever. But if she rips off a man and steals from him, has sex with him, now she's too young. Now she can't conceive. Her brain is just too addled from youth, and the guy has to be put behind bars. Recognize the motivation behind society. Recognize it. Okay, we'll end it here.